Jonah Mercer walked through the iron gate of Briarwick estate with a borrowed surname, a canvas lunch sack, and mud already drying on the cuffs of his trousers. By law, every acre beyond that gate belonged to him. The rice fields, the warehouses, the accounts locked inside the counting room, even the white-columned house on the ridge, all of it, but nobody there knew his face. And for the next 10 years, Jonah would sleep in a narrow bunk beside hired hands, haul timber until his shoulders burned, and lower his eyes whenever the estate manager rode past. He was not poor because he had lost his inheritance. He was poor because he had decided not to claim it. Not yet.
Because the day he arrived at Briarwick, an old lawyer had warned him that the men running his father's estate were not only stealing from it. They might have killed to keep it. Jonah had been raised 2 counties inland, in a weather-bent house where rain slipped through the roof, and supper often depended on who needed fence work that week. His mother, Lydia, was a seamstress with tired hands and a voice that never lost its gentleness. She told him 3 things more often than prayers. Learn to read the paper before you sign it. Do not mistake fine clothes for clean hands. And never open a door until you know who is waiting on the other side. Jonah never understood why she said that last part while staring at a small brass key sewn into the lining of her old hymn book. When he was a boy, he thought the key was just another memory she could not bear to explain. By the time he turned 21, he knew better. Lydia had fallen ill during a wet winter. She tried to hide how quickly the fever was taking her, but Jonah saw the truth in the way her sewing needle slipped from her fingers. On her final morning, she pressed the hymn book into his hands. "Do not sell this," she whispered, "and do not trust the first man who calls you fortunate." 3 days after the funeral, a carriage stopped outside Jonah's house. The man who stepped out was thin, gray-bearded, and too carefully dressed for that poor road. His name was Ezra Caldwell. He had been the legal advisor and closest friend of Augustus Mercer, one of the wealthiest rice estate owners along the Georgia coast.
Jonah almost shut the door when Ezra said the name. He had heard stories about Augustus Mercer. Everybody had. Thousands of acres, warehouses on the river, ships passing through Savannah with his mark on the paperwork. A family name spoken with the kind of respect that is often only fear in polished shoes. Ezra did not begin with comfort. He began with proof. Letters written in Augustus's hand. A baptismal record hidden under another name. A sealed declaration naming Jonah as his lawful son and primary heir. Jonah read the papers twice, then a third time, because the words would not stay still. His mother had not lied to him. She had protected him. Augustus Mercer had loved Lydia before pride, family pressure, and the cruel rules of his world pushed her into silence. He had sent money when he could. He had prepared documents. He had planned to bring Jonah into the open once certain business affairs were settled. Then he died. Officially, it was a sudden fever. Privately, Ezra did not believe that for 1 second. Your father was about to expose a ring of men stealing through his estate accounts, Ezra told him. After his death, records vanished. Witnesses changed their stories. 2 clerks left Georgia before I could question them. And last month, someone broke into my office and searched only 1 drawer. Jonah knew the answer before he asked the question. My drawer. Ezra nodded. The estate is yours. But if we announce that today, they will smile in court, burn what remains, and make you look like an imposter. Or worse. Jonah looked down at the brass key in the hymn book. For the first time, it felt less like an heirloom and more like a warning. Ezra offered him a dangerous choice. Claim Briarwick immediately, and fight blind. Or enter the estate under another name, work among the laborers, and learn what the ledgers could never tell him. Who was honest? Who was afraid? Who had been paid? And who was still carrying his father's secrets? It sounded mad. It also sounded like the only plan that gave the truth a chance. So Jonah Mercer became Jonah Bell. A man with no family worth mentioning, no claim worth fearing, no reason to be watched. He arrived at Briarwick in the spring of 1879. The estate was beautiful from a distance, and rotten up close. The field stretched toward the marsh in long green lines.
The river turned silver at dawn. The big house caught morning light like something out of a painting. But behind the pretty view, roofs leaked over workers' cabins. The company store charged prices that swallowed wages before families could count them. Medical supplies disappeared. Pay ledgers showed deductions nobody remembered agreeing to. Briarwick was still producing wealth. The people producing it were not seeing much of it. The man in charge was Silas Crow. Silas had the polished courtesy of someone who expected to be believed. He wore ivory-handled cufflinks, kept his beard trimmed with barbershop precision, and spoke to visitors as if Briarwick ran on discipline and Christian order. But Jonah saw what happened when visitors left. A dockhand dismissed for asking about missing pay. A widow charged twice for flour. A boy whipped with words so cruel the bruises were invisible, but worse. Silas never raised his voice, unless he already knew nobody powerful was listening. Jonah listened anyway. During his first year, he learned the estate by pain. He learned where the levees broke first after hard rain. He learned which mule team would kick. He learned which storage shed had a false back wall. He learned which overseer drank enough at night to say dangerous things by accident. And he learned that the workers had built a whole language of warning. A lantern left low in the tool shed meant Silas was angry. A red rag tied near the pump meant a stranger was asking questions. A shovel turned upside down against the barn meant do not speak near the office windows. The first person who treated Jonah like more than an extra pair of hands was Amos Price. Amos was a black freedman in his late 60s, broad-shouldered even with age, with one clouded eye and a way of seeing more than men with perfect vision. He had worked that land before the war, through the war, and after it, and he carried history in his silence. "You ask too many questions, Bell," Amos told him one night. Jonah froze. Amos smiled without showing his teeth. "That can be wisdom," the old man said, "or it can be a grave." The second person who unsettled him was Mara Bell. She had no relation to the false name Jonah used, though the coincidence made the workers laugh. Mara worked in the counting office, copying invoices, tallying delivery slips, and correcting numbers the men above her wished she would stop noticing. She was young, sharp-eyed, and patient in the way a locked drawer is patient. Jonah saw Silas berate her once over a column of figures. Mara did not cry. She simply dipped her pen again and said, "If the number is honest, it will add the same way twice." From that moment, Jonah trusted her intelligence. He was slower to trust anything else. Years passed, not empty years, not waiting years, working years. Jonah sent reports to Ezra through coded letters hidden inside orders for machine parts. He copied wagon marks. He memorized bank names. He learned which officials visited Silas after sundown and which merchants were paid in cash when the books claimed credit. By the fourth year, the theft was no longer a suspicion. It was a system. Briarwick harvested thousands of barrels of rice in a strong season. Yet the workers were told profits had collapsed. Maintenance funds were approved, then vanished. A shipment listed as spoiled was sold quietly through a river broker 2 counties away. Once, Jonah counted 26 sealed crates leaving the warehouse after midnight. The ledger recorded 8. The extra 18 crates did not vanish. They became money in somebody else's pocket. Still, Jonah had no clean proof linking Silas to his father's death. And without that, Ezra warned, the men behind Silas would survive. "They can sacrifice a fief," Ezra wrote. "They will protect a murderer." In the 7th year, Jonah nearly abandoned the plan. A storm tore through the marsh and broke the east levee. Workers spent 2 days waist-deep in brown water, shoring up earth with sacks, boards, and bare hands. A fever moved through the quarters afterward. 3 children died before a doctor came. The estate books later showed a full payment for emergency medicine. No medicine had arrived. That night, Jonah stood behind the smokehouse with his fists pressed against the wall until his knuckles split. He could have ended the disguise then. He could have walked into Savannah, stood beside Ezra, and filed the claim. But he also knew what would happen. Silas would blame clerks. The river brokers would disappear. The officials would deny everything. The higher men, the ones who had survived Augustus Mercer's death, would remain untouched. And the workers would get speeches instead of justice.
So Jonah stayed. By the 10th year, his face looked older than his age. His hands were hard. His back knew the weather. People had stopped seeing him as a newcomer and started asking him to carry messages, settle quarrels, teach letters to children after dark. He had come to Briarwick to study a crime. He had accidentally become part of a community. Then Amos broke his leg. It happened when a wagon axle snapped near the lower warehouse. The mule team lurched, a wheel dropped, and Amos went down under a load of timber. Jonah reached him first. The old man was conscious, sweating, and trying to make a joke through clenched teeth. "Don't look so scared, Bell. It takes more than wood to finish old oak." But later, when the room had quieted and the doctor had left, Amos called Jonah close.
"Your real name is not Bell," he said.
Jonah did not move. Amos reached beneath the blanket and pulled out a narrow oilcloth bundle. "Augustus Mercer gave this to me the week before he died. Said one day his son might need it." Jonah felt the walls recede. "You knew." "Not at first. Then I saw your eyes when men spoke his name." Amos gave a tired smile. "And I saw you carry yourself like a man trying not to stand where he belongs." Inside the oilcloth was a small iron token stamped with the Mercer crest, a map of the old chapel grounds, and one letter. Augustus had written it in haste. "If this reaches my son, tell him I failed in courage before I found it. Tell him the key does not open a door in the house, it opens the place where prayers are buried.
Tell him to trust the man who remembers the flood year." Jonah read the line again. The place where prayers are buried. The old chapel. Briarwick's chapel had been abandoned since before the war. Its roof sagged. Vines swallowed the windows. The bell rope hung like a dead snake from the tower. Workers avoided it after dusk, because old buildings collect stories, and the chapel had collected more than most. 2 nights later, Jonah went there with the brass key from his mother's hymn book. Rain had softened the ground. The moon moved in and out of torn clouds. He found the marker from Augustus's map near the back wall, half buried under weeds. Beneath it was a stone hatch. The brass key fit into an iron lock so old it seemed impossible that anything inside it still mattered. Then it turned. The hatch opened onto a narrow stair dropping into darkness. Jonah almost laughed, not from humor, but from the terrible patience of dead men. His father had not hidden the truth in the grand house. He had hidden it beneath a chapel. Jonah descended with a lantern. The chamber below was small, damp, and lined with brick. Wooden boxes sat on shelves above the reach of flood water. Inside them were ledgers, letters, signed receipts, coded account books, and a journal wrapped in black cloth. Augustus Mercer's journal. Jonah opened it with shaking hands. At first, the entries were businesslike. Names, dates, shipments, short notes about land, rice prices, credit, and debts. Then the handwriting changed. The lines grew tighter. The words became dangerous.
Augustus had discovered that Briarwick was part of a larger theft network, stretching through 3 estates, 2 river brokers, a bank agent, and at least 1 county official. False shortages were created on paper. Real goods were sold off book. Worker debt was inflated to keep families tied to the estate. Witnesses were threatened. One man who refused to cooperate was found drowned in a drainage canal. The final entries were worse. "I have been warned twice. C says I should leave Savannah until papers are safe. I will not. If I die of a fever,
It will be the strangest fever ever carried in a sealed bottle. Jonah stopped breathing. A sealed bottle. The doctor who signed Augustus Mercer's death certificate had written fever. But Augustus had feared poison. Jonah copied the most important names into a small notebook and bundled several documents beneath his shirt. He was about to climb out when voices crossed the chapel floor above him. Silas Crow. And another man Jonah knew only by reputation. Judge Alton Reeves, a county official who had visited Briarwick 3 times in 10 years and never once spoken to a worker. "We searched the house," Silas said. "If Mercer hid anything, it is gone." Judge Reeves answered coldly. "Dead men do not worry me. Sons do." Jonah tightened his grip on the lantern. Silas lowered his voice. "The lawyer has gone quiet." "Quiet men are often waiting," Reeves said. "Find the heir before the petition window closes. If Augustus's blood walks into court with those papers, every account opens." For 2 hours, Jonah crouched beneath the chapel floor while the men above him spoke of bribes, missing witnesses, and a second search planned for Ezra Caldwell's office. By dawn, he understood the full shape of the danger. The men who feared him were not ghosts from his father's past. They were still in power. And now, somehow, they knew he was alive. Jonah wanted to run to Ezra immediately. Mara stopped him before he reached the old road. She stepped out from behind a live oak, shawl drawn tight, eyes fixed on the bundle under his coat. "You found it," she said. Jonah's first instinct was denial. His second was fear. Mara looked toward the chapel. "You are not as careful as you think." Before he could answer, she handed him 3 folded pages. Copies from the estate office. Payments to a river broker. A medical invoice dated 2 days before Augustus died. And a receipt for imported laudanum and foxglove sent to the big house under Silas Crow's private account. Jonah stared at her. "Why help me?" Mara's voice did not soften. "Because my brother died after asking why his pay was cut, Silas called it a drunken fall. I have been waiting for a truth big enough to break him." For the first time in 10 years, Jonah told someone at Briarwick his real name. Mara listened without blinking. When he finished, she said, "Then stop acting like surviving is the same as winning." Those words stayed with him. But Silas moved first. 3 days later, at the monthly pay gathering, he ordered every worker to stand in the yard before the office. Hired guards lined the porch. Judge Reeves stood beside him in a dark coat despite the heat. Silas held up a paper. "We have discovered a fraud among us," he announced. "A man using false employment papers. A man sent to stir discontent and steal from this estate." Jonah felt the crowd shift. Silas pointed directly at him. "Jonah Bell, step forward." Jonah did. For 10 years, he had imagined revealing the truth in a courtroom, with Ezra beside him, and documents arranged in clean stacks. Instead, he stood in dirt, in work clothes, while the people he had lived beside watched armed men close around him. Silas smiled. "Or should I call you Mercer?" A shock moved through the yard. Jonah saw fear on some faces, confusion on others, and betrayal on a few. Judge Reeves spoke next. "This man claims blood rights to Briarwick. We believe he has forged papers, stolen records, and conspired with outside agitators." Jonah looked at Mara. She stood near the office steps, pale but steady. Then Silas said the words that cut deepest. "Miss Bell has already told us enough." For one terrible moment, Jonah believed it. He believed Mara had turned him in. 10 years of caution, broken by trust. Silas ordered the guards to take him. They moved forward. And then Amos, with his leg still bound and a cane shaking in his hand, stepped between them. "No." One word, not shouted, not begged, placed. A guard laughed. "Move, old man." Amos did not move. Neither did the workers behind him. A woman stepped beside Amos. Then a dockhand. Then 2 field men.
Then a carpenter still holding a mallet. Then mothers with children clutched close but eyes lifted. Within seconds, Jonah was no longer standing alone. He was standing behind a wall of people who had spent their lives being told to step aside. Silas's smile cracked. "You do not understand what he is," he shouted. Amos raised his chin. "We understand exactly what he is. He worked beside us when you stole from us." Mara walked down the office steps. Silas snapped, "Go back inside." She did not. Instead, she pulled a packet from beneath her ledger board and raised it high. "You wanted me to tell you what he knew," she said. "So I did. Enough to make you gather every guilty man in one place." The crowd went silent. Mara turned toward Judge Reeves. "And while you were watching him, I made copies." Silas lunged for her.
The carpenter's mallet lifted. Silas stopped. Mara began reading. Not accusations. Numbers. Names. Dates. 32 missing payroll entries. 14 false medicine invoices. 6 warehouse shipments removed at night. 3 payments to Judge Reeves's brother under a company that did not exist. 1 delivery of poison plants to Silas Crow, dated before Augustus Mercer died. Every line struck harder than shouting. Jonah stepped forward and drew his father's journal from under his coat. "My father knew," he said. His voice carried across the yard, rough but clear. Augustus Mercer knew this estate was being drained. He knew workers were being trapped in debt. He knew powerful men were using Briarwick as a purse. And before he could expose it, he died of a fever he predicted would come from a bottle. Judge Reeves took 1 step back. That small movement told the crowd everything. Silas pulled a pistol from his coat. The yard froze. "Give me the journal," he said. Jonah did not. Silas's hand shook. For years, that man had ruled by making others afraid. Now fear had finally found him. Before he could fire, Ezra Caldwell's voice cut across the yard. "Silas Crow, lower that weapon." Ezra stood at the gate with 2 federal marshals and the sheriff from Savannah behind him. Mara had sent for him the night before. Silas swung the pistol toward the gate. 1 marshal fired into the dirt at his feet. Silas dropped the weapon. No one cheered at first. The sound had frightened the joy out of them. But when the marshals took Silas, when Judge Reeves tried to protest and found no one listening, when Ezra walked to Jonah and placed a sealed court packet in his hands, the silence changed. It became the sound of a room after a locked window opens. The months that followed shook the coast. Investigators seized the Briarwick ledgers. River brokers were questioned. Bank accounts were frozen. Witnesses who had stayed silent for years came forward once they saw Silas in chains. The theft was larger than Jonah had imagined. Over 10 years, more than $40,000 had been siphoned through false shortages, inflated debt, fake repairs, and secret river sales. In that world, that sum could build homes, pay wages, repair levees, stock medicine, and educate children for years. It had bought cufflinks instead. It had bought silence. The poisoning charge took longer. Men who kill through paperwork know how to bury a bottle. But Augustus's journal, Mara's copies, Ezra's old correspondence, and 1 terrified former clerk finally completed the chain. The court could not bring Augustus back, but it named what had happened to him. Murder. Jonah heard the word in a Savannah courtroom and felt no victory. Only grief arriving 10 years late. That evening, he walked alone to the abandoned chapel. The stone hatch was sealed now. The documents were gone, the chamber that had carried his father's truth was empty. Amos found him there after sunset. "You thought the truth would feel lighter," the old man said. Jonah nodded. Amos sat carefully on a fallen stone. "It rarely does. Truth is not light. It is weight placed where it belongs." That became the sentence Jonah carried into the hardest decision of his life. Because, legally, the answer was simple. Briarwick was his. The court recognized him as Augustus Mercer's heir. Ezra urged him to move into the big house for safety.
Bankers requested appointments, merchants suddenly remembered manners, newspapers wanted drawings of his face. Everybody wanted the secret heir to become the new master of Briarwick. Jonah delayed. He kept his bunk for 3 more weeks. He walked the levees before dawn. He ate at the workers' tables. He listened to families describe debts they did not understand, roofs that still leaked, children who could read numbers on sacks but not words in books. Some advisors called it sentiment.
Jonah called it evidence. One afternoon, he entered the big house for the first time as owner. The rooms were high-ceilinged and cool. Silver sat in cabinets. Portraits watched from walls. The office smelled of leather and dust and decisions made too far from the people who suffered them. On the desk lay a final letter Ezra had kept sealed until the court ruling. Augustus had written Jonah's name on the envelope. "My son, if this letter reaches you, then some part of my cowardice has been forgiven by time. I loved your mother. I loved you. But I let fear and family pride build a wall between what I felt and what I did. If I leave you land, remember this. Land is not legacy. A house is not legacy. A name carved into a gate is not legacy.
Legacy is what remains in other people's lives after your power has passed through them. If you inherit Briarwick, do not ask only what is yours. Ask who paid for it." Jonah had to stop reading. Outside the office window, he could see the workers' quarters at the edge of the yard. Small roofs, thin walls, smoke rising from cook fires. For the first time, he understood why his mother had sewn the key into a hymn book. Some doors should only open after a man has learned to kneel. The next morning, Jonah called everyone to the main yard. Workers came slowly, uncertain what ownership would sound like now that it had a familiar face. Some expected gifts. Some expected speeches. Some expected nothing, because disappointment had trained them well. Jonah climbed onto the office steps. He was dressed in the same work shirt he had worn for years. No polished coat. No silver watch. No owner's distance. "I came here 10 years ago to discover what was being stolen," he said. "I thought the answer would be money." He looked across the yard. "I was wrong." No one spoke. Money was stolen. Land was misused. Books were falsified. But the deeper theft was time. Health. Childhood. Trust. The right to work without being trapped by the very place your hands kept alive. Mara stood near the front, ledger tucked against her chest. Amos watched from beneath the oak. Jonah continued. "Today, Briarwick changes." He did not say it loudly. He said it like a deed being recorded. Company store debts created by false accounting would be canceled. Wages would rise before the next payday. No worker would be charged for medicine ordered in the estate's name. Repairs would begin on every family cabin before money was spent on the big house. A school would open in the old carriage building within 6 months, with books paid for from recovered funds. A clinic would be stocked before the next fever season. Every ledger would be open to a council elected by the workers. And once the first honest harvest was counted, a share of estate profits would return to the people whose labor created them. For a moment, the crowd did not understand. They had heard promises before. Promises usually came dressed in soft words and left behind the same hard life. Then Mara opened the new ledger and read the first signed orders aloud. Names, dates, amounts, deadlines, proof before applause. That was when the crying started. A mother covered her face. The dockhand looked away. Amos leaned both hands on his cane and bowed his head. Jonah saw it then. Hope is not always a shout. Sometimes it is the first quiet breath after a person realizes the trap door under them has been nailed shut. Briarwick did not become perfect. No honest place does. The levees still broke. Rice prices still fell. Illness still came in wet years. Old habits fought new rules. But the direction changed. Within 1 year, the estate store stopped functioning like a debt cage. Within 2, the school had 47 children and 12 adults attending evening lessons. Within 3,
The clinic had reduced fever deaths across the estate by more than half. Within 5, families who had never held savings began buying tools, livestock, and small plots of their own. The recovered money did not vanish into the big house. It moved outward, into roofs, into books, into medicine, into wages that arrived whole, into ledgers people were allowed to read. Visitors came from Savannah to see what Jonah had done. Some praised him as generous. Others called him foolish. A few warned that sharing profit would ruin discipline. Jonah would take them to the fields after rain and ask them to watch the workers repair a levee without waiting for threats. That is discipline, he would say. What Silas had was fear. Mara became Briarwick's chief accountant, though she refused the title at first, because titles had so often been used to hide useless men. She built a system where every shipment had 3 records, one for the office, one for the warehouse, and one kept by the workers' council. If a number is honest, she said at the first council meeting, it can survive being seen. Amos lived long enough to see the school named for Lydia Mercer, Jonah's mother. At the dedication, Jonah tried to speak and failed, so Amos did it for him. This building stands because a woman who had almost nothing still taught her son that knowledge was something no thief could steal. The crowd grew quiet. Jonah looked at the doorway where children were waiting with slates in their hands, and he felt a grief so full it almost became peace. Years later, when people told the story of Briarwick, they liked to begin with the shocking part. The heir who slept in a worker's bunk, the owner who carried another man's lunch pail, the son who found his father's murder hidden beneath a chapel floor. Those parts were true. But Jonah knew they were not the whole story. The real miracle was slower. It was a man entering a place he owned on paper and discovering, day by day, that paper is the smallest form of ownership. A deed can give you land. It cannot give you the right to be trusted. A name can open a gate. It cannot tell you what happened inside the cabins after dark. Which child needs a doctor? Which ledger hides a lie? Which old man is holding a dead friend's secret because loyalty outlived fear? Jonah spent 10 years pretending to be ordinary, and in those 10 years, ordinary people taught him what power is supposed to protect. On the last evening Amos ever sat beneath the Briarwick oak, he asked Jonah whether he regretted waiting so long to claim the estate. Jonah looked toward the schoolhouse. Lamplight glowed in the windows. Children's voices moved through the dusk, spelling words their grandparents had been punished for wanting. Beyond them, workers crossed the yard toward homes with repaired roofs and smoke rising steady from their chimneys. Some days, Jonah said. Amos smiled. Only some? Jonah laughed softly, then grew quiet. If I had claimed it at once, I might have owned Briarwick sooner. He looked at the old man's weathered hands. But I would not have known what it was. Amos closed his eyes and nodded. Not long after, the old man passed away in his sleep. Jonah buried him near the oak, not as a servant of the estate, but as one of the men who had saved it from becoming nothing more than land with a fine name. Years moved on. The grand house remained, but Jonah never let it become the center of Briarwick again. The center was the school bell, the clinic door, the council table, the warehouse ledger anyone could inspect, the fields where work no longer required silence to survive. When Jonah died many years later, his will contained a final instruction. Briarwick was not to return to one private hand. The land would be held in trust, governed by the families who lived and worked there, with profits divided among maintenance, wages, education, medical care, and future ownership shares. At the reading, Mara was old, nearly blind, and still sharper than every lawyer in the room. She listened to the final line and smiled. Jonah had written it himself. My father left me a key. My mother taught me how to use it. The people of Briarwick showed me which doors were worth opening. That is why the story lasted. Not because a hidden heir became rich. Not because corrupt men fell,
but because Jonah Mercer learned the difference between possessing a place and belonging to it. The deed gave him Briarwick. The people taught him what it was worth.